0500. On the line. You have 4 minutes, and you have had 4 minutes every day for 6 weeks. Chief Petty Officer Emery Tibbets said it from the hatch of the compartment at 0455, without volume, the way a man says a thing he has said 900 times, and 88 recruits came off their racks in the dark. Division 042 had been in training for 6 weeks and 2 days. They were past the part where people cried, and into the part where people simply worked, which is the more interesting part, and the part nobody films. The compartment was 90 feet long, 44 racks in 2 rows, a center aisle wide enough for 2 people to pass without turning, a deck that showed every scuff and was therefore buffed every night by somebody who had earned it. At the far end, a passageway, and past that, the drill hall. At 0500, they were on the line. Here is what a division flag is, because the whole of this story turns on it, and almost nobody outside a training command understands it. It is a colored pennant. It is a piece of cloth, and it is carried at the front of the division at pass in review, and it is awarded on an aggregate score. Academic pass rate, inspection results, physical readiness average across every member of the division, not the best of them, and not the median, the average. A division that earns all 3 carries a flag that says so, in front of a drill hall full of families, and the recruits who carry it remember it for 40 years. Chief Tibbets had commanded 14 divisions. 9 of them had carried a flag. He did not talk about that. Times are posted, he said. Read them or don't. The times went up on the bulkhead outside the compartment every Tuesday and Friday, printed, in rank order, 88 lines long, and every recruit in that division could find their own name in under 2 seconds. Recruit Seaman Inez Kovalchuk was always on the last line. She was 27 years old, which made her 9 years older than the median in that compartment, and the second oldest person in the division by 4 years. She was not weak. That was the confusing part. She could do the pull-ups. She could do the sit-ups. She could carry a rack mate's sea bag as well as her own, and she had done it twice. She could not run. Not could not in the sense of would not, or gave up, or fell out. She ran every step of every event, and she finished every one of them. Last, by a margin that got wider across the 6 weeks instead of narrower, which is not how boot camp is supposed to work. She was not slow the way the 18-year-olds were slow. The 18-year-olds were slow because they had never run anywhere in their lives, and then suddenly ran everywhere. 6 weeks fixed most of them. She was slow the way a machine is slow when a part of it has been replaced with a part that does not quite match. On the Tuesday of week 7, the times went up, and Division 042's physical readiness average came out 4 points below the standard, and every recruit on that bulkhead could do the arithmetic in their head, and there were 88 of them and 1 line at the bottom. Recruit Chief Petty Officer Imogen Fairweather stood in front of the sheet for a long time. She was 19. She had been made Recruit Chief in week 3 because she was the only person in the division who could hold a full watch bill in her head, and the billet meant she was responsible for the division's standing in a way that was real enough to be written down and not real enough to give her any authority at all. She read the sheet twice. Then she took it down, which she was allowed to do, and carried it into the compartment. Kovalchuk was at her rack, squaring the blanket corner. Kovalchuk. Recruit Chief. Do you know what our average is? 4 under. Do you know why? Yes, Recruit Chief. That was the wrong answer, or it was the right answer given too flatly, or there was no right answer available in that compartment on that Tuesday. Fairweather stood in the center aisle with the sheet in her hand, and 86 people pretending very hard to be doing something else, and she said it. You good for nothing, Deadweight? The compartment went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet when everybody agrees with a thing they would not have said. Kowalchuk did not answer. She finished the blanket corner. Then she straightened up and stood at the foot of her rack with her hands at her sides, and she took her breathing down. Not gasping, not a sigh. She dropped it onto a count, 4 in and 4 held and 4 out, standing perfectly still, the way you do it when you have been taught to make your body obey a number instead of a feeling. It took her 11 seconds. Then she was exactly as she had been before. She had been called worse by better, and the only thing anybody noticed was that she did not go red. Chief Tibbets, who had been standing in the hatch since the word deadweight, and who had said nothing, turned around and went back down the passageway to his office and closed the door. Third-class swim qualification was on the Thursday. The tank was indoors, 25 meters, tiled, with a gallery above it, and high windows that put a hard band of light across the water at 9 in the morning. Petty Officer First Class Cleo Marchetti ran it, with a clipboard and a whistle and the patience of somebody who has watched 400 18-year-olds discover they are afraid of water. The qualification is not difficult. Jump from a platform, swim 50 yards, then a prone float for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is the part that breaks people. 5 minutes is a very long time to lie face down in water and do nothing while your body tells you that you are drowning. And the recruits who fail almost always fail it there, in the 3rd minute, when the panic arrives and the arms start. Division 042 went in by squads. Kowalchuk went in the 2nd squad. She jumped. She swam 50 yards at a pace that was unremarkable, and then she rolled into the float. And then she was simply gone. That is the only way Marchetti could describe it afterward. The other recruits in the water were visibly floating, which is to say, they were working at it, adjusting, lifting the head, sculling with the hands. Kowalchuk stopped. Face down, arms loose, no movement at all, except a small rise every 15 seconds or so when she turned her head to the side and took a breath and put it back. No sculling. No adjusting. She lay in the water like an object that had been put there. At 5 minutes, Marchetti blew the whistle and 11 recruits came up. Kowalchuk stayed down. At 6 minutes, Marchetti checked her clipboard and looked again. At 8 minutes, 2 recruits at the edge of the tank had stopped talking. At 11 minutes and 20 seconds, Marchetti walked the length of the tank and crouched at the edge. Recruit, you can secure. Kowalchuk lifted her head, and she wasn't out of breath, and she said, "Aye, Petty Officer." And she got out of the water without using the ladder, which is a small thing that requires a specific set of shoulders. Marchetti wrote nothing on the clipboard. There is no box on a 3rd-class swim qualification for 11 minutes and 20 seconds. There is a box for pass. She checked pass. Chief Tibbets had been in the gallery since the 2nd squad went in. He did not come down. When it was over, he went back to his office, and he opened the bottom drawer, and he took out a folder he had already read 4 times in 6 weeks. It was thin. Most recruit folders are thin. The medical waiver in it ran to 9 pages, which is not thin at all, and it had 11 signature blocks, and the last one was dated 8 weeks before she reported. He read the whole thing again anyway. Then he closed it and put both hands flat on top of it and sat there for a while with the door shut. There is a rule about this, and every recruit division commander knows it. You do not tell the division. Not a hint, not a look, not a lightened load. A recruit who arrives with something in their file that would make the compartment go quiet has exactly one asset, which is that nobody knows. And the moment a chief hands them a piece of that, it stops being theirs and starts being his. He had been told this by a master chief in 2009, and he had believed it ever since, and it had never once been this hard. Fairweather heard about the 11 minutes at lunch. She thought about it for approximately 4 seconds, and then she put it down. And she was not being cruel when she did it. She was being consistent. The division is not graded on floating. The physical readiness average is a run time, a push-up count, and a sit-up count. And floating for 11 minutes appears in exactly none of them. And the sheet on the bulkhead still said 4 under. And in 11 days, it would say whatever it said on the final, and that number would decide whether 88 people carried a flag. She was 19 years old, and she had been handed a responsibility with no authority attached, which is the worst kind, and she had decided to discharge it honestly. That decision was going to cost her more than anything else in her life so far. Nobody organized what happened next. That is worth saying clearly, because it would be a tidier story if somebody had. There was no group chat, because recruits do not have phones. There was no chant down the passageway, and no nickname painted on anything. There was no meeting. The division simply stopped, including her. At the galley, she sat down, and the 4 people at that end of the table finished eating faster than they had intended to. In the compartment, when the racks were being squared for inspection and 88 people were helping each other with corners, nobody came to her end. When the division was told to count off, the count came to her and went past her a half-beat quick. It was not cruelty. Cruelty takes effort. This was the absence of effort. It was simply easier not to, and 86 people independently found it easier, and the result was indistinguishable from a decision. Recruit Tomasz Bielak was 18 years old, and from a town in the middle of a state nobody visits, and on the Friday, he sat down opposite her at the galley table with his tray and said nothing at all. He did that for 11 minutes. Then he took his tray and went. He did it again on the Saturday, and on the Sunday, and by the second week, it was simply where he sat, and neither of them ever discussed it, and that was the entire friendship. There is a thing that happens to a person who is being excluded by 86 people at once, and it is not what anybody expects. She got faster at everything else, not the running. The running was the running. But the rack inspection, the sea bag stow, the uniform layout, the compartment sweep down, the watch turnover, the classroom work. Every single thing in that building that was not a run, she got better at. Week over week, quietly, and she never once made anybody watch her do it. Bielak noticed, because Bielak was the only person looking. He worked out sometime in week 8 that the reason he could never find anything wrong with his own rack in the morning was that somebody had already been at it. He did not say thank you, because a recruit does not say thank you across a compartment for a thing that is not supposed to have happened. He started leaving his boots out instead. She squared those too. The 86 were not monsters. That is the part that has to be said. They were 17 and 18 and 19 years old. They had been awake since 04:55 for 61 consecutive days. They were being graded as one organism, and the arithmetic was on a bulkhead in the passageway in a font large enough to read from 10 feet away. You put a printed sheet in front of 86 exhausted teenagers with one name on the bottom line and a flag on the top. And you do not need anybody to be cruel. You only need everybody to be tired. Kowalchuk got up at 04:40 every morning, 20 minutes before the compartment, and squared her own rack, and then she squared 2 others. She did not tell anybody she was doing it. She did it for a recruit named Ordonez, who could not get the hospital corner right, and was losing points for the whole division every inspection, and for a recruit named Pham, whose sea bag stow had been failed 3 times. She fixed both to a standard nobody in that division had been taught yet, folded in a way the inspecting petty officer noticed on the Thursday and could not account for. The inspection score went up by 6 points, and the division did not know why. On the Tuesday of week 8, Fairweather found Marchetti in the passageway outside the compartment. "Petty officer, may I speak?" "Go." "If Kowalchuk runs the same time on the final as she ran on the last 3, we lose the flag by 4 points. Marchetti waited. "That is not an opinion, petty officer. That is the sheet. I did it 4 times. "I know you did," Marchetti said. "Recruit chief, is there a question in this?" There was, and Fairweather did not ask it, because asking it out loud would have made it a request, and she was not ready to make a request yet. She went back into the compartment and stood in the center aisle for a while, looking down the 2 rows at 44 racks and 88 people, and at the far end, a woman of 27 squaring a blanket corner that was already square. If you have ever been asked to carry a standard you were given no power to enforce, stay with this one. Subscribe to Honor Tales. Fairweather wrote the request on the Wednesday of week 8, at the table in the compartment, in front of everybody. That is the detail that mattered later, and that nobody remembered correctly. She did not do it in a corner. She sat at the center table under the lights at 19:30 with a pen and the standard form, and she filled it out. And when Bielak walked past and looked at what she was writing, she turned it toward him so he could read it. A setback request. Recruit Seaman Kowalchuk, Division 042, recommended for administrative setback to a subsequent division on grounds of failure to meet the physical readiness standard within the training timeline. It is a real form. It exists because sometimes a recruit needs 8 more weeks, and everybody is better off if they get them. It is submitted through the recruit division commander to the training officer, and it is not a punishment, and it is not a discharge, and roughly 1 in 40 recruits is set back for one reason or another, and most of them graduate perfectly well 8 weeks later. The numbers Fairweather attached were accurate to the second decimal place. She signed it, and she carried it to the chief's office, and she knocked. "Recruit chief. Chief. Request for administrative setback. 1 member. Submitted for your endorsement." Tibbets took it. He read the whole thing standing up, which took about 90 seconds, and Fairweather stood at attention the entire time and did not fidget once. "Does the member know?" "No, Chief. She will be told. That is the rule, and it is not negotiable. Petty Officer Marchetti will tell her tomorrow." "Aye, Chief." "Recruit Chief." He put the form down. "Is there anything you want to add to this that isn't on the paper?" Fairweather considered it honestly. That was the thing about her. "No, Chief. It's all on the paper." "That's what I thought," he said. "Carry on." Marchetti told her the next morning in the passageway, procedurally, because that is how it is done. "Recruit Kowalchuk, a setback request naming you was submitted last night. You're entitled to know it exists. You're not entitled to know what happens to it. Do you understand?" "Yes, Petty Officer." "Do you have anything to say for the record?" "No, Petty Officer." Marchetti looked at her for slightly longer than the exchange required. "All right," she said. "Carry on." Here is what nobody in that division knew, including Fairweather, including Marchetti, including the 86 people who had stopped speaking to her. The waiver had a date on it. Not a date it was signed. A date it expired. The waiver that had taken 4 years and 11 signatures to obtain, that permitted a medically separated sailor to return to service, was valid for a single training cycle and required completion of recruit training by the 22nd of July. A setback was 8 weeks. 8 weeks put her past it. Past it meant the waiver lapsed. A lapsed waiver meant reapplying, and reapplying meant starting a process that had already consumed 4 years of her life once, at 28 instead of 23, against a medical board that had already said no to her twice. There was no version of a setback in which she came back. She had known that since February. She had known it every morning at 0440, and every afternoon on the drill field, and every time the sheet went up on the bulkhead, with her name on the last line of it. And she had told nobody, which is the decision the entire story rests on, and which deserves to be understood properly rather than admired. She could have said it. There was no order preventing her. She could have stood in that compartment on any of 61 mornings and said 4 sentences, and the whole thing would have changed shape immediately. The exclusion would have stopped. Bielak would have had company at the galley table, and Fairweather would very likely never have written the form. She did not say it, because she had thought about what happens next. What happens next is that 86 recruits stop competing with her. What happens next is that a chief has to decide every day whether he is grading her against the standard or against the story. What happens next is that she graduates with an asterisk that never comes off, and she carries it to her A school and to her first command and into every room for 20 years. And somewhere in year 6, a first-class petty officer she has never met says something about how she got through boot camp on a sob story. She had been in the Navy before. She knew exactly how long a thing like that lasts. So she took the sheet, and the bottom line, and the 86, and she kept the only thing she had brought in with her, which was that whatever happened, she had done it on the same standard as everybody else, and nobody could ever take that particular sentence away from her. It was a good decision made for good reasons, and it very nearly ended her career for the second time. Chief Tibbets had the form on his desk at 2100 on the Wednesday, with the endorsement block empty. He could endorse it, which was defensible, honest, and correct on the numbers. He could disapprove it, which would require him to write a reason in a box, and the only true reason he had was in a folder in his bottom drawer that he was not permitted to reference. Or he could do nothing, which is not a thing a chief petty officer is supposed to do. He put it in the drawer on top of the folder and closed the drawer, and that bought her 9 days. On the Thursday night, Chief Tibbets made a telephone call from his own quarters at 2210, which is late enough that a call is a decision. He called a master chief at a diving command, 2 states away, a man he had known since 2011 and had spoken to perhaps 4 times since. He did not use her name. He described a situation. There was a long pause at the other end. "Chief," the master chief said, "I'm going to tell you the only thing I'm able to tell you, and then I'm going to hang up. And I want you to think about it properly, instead of the way people think about things at 10 at night. Go ahead. Do not put your thumb on that scale." Tibbets said nothing. "I know what you want to do. You want to walk into that compartment and say 4 sentences and watch 88 faces change. I have wanted to do that in my life. It feels like the honorable thing, and it is not. She's going to be set back." "Then she is going to be set back," the Master Chief said. "Chief, listen to me. Whatever that person has, the only thing that makes it hers is that she carried it in without help. The second you hand it to that division on her behalf, it becomes a thing that was given to her by a chief who felt sorry for her. You will have taken the only thing she brought with her. And if the paperwork kills it, then the paperwork kills it, and that is the system doing what the system does, and it is not yours to fix at 10 o'clock at night out of a feeling." He hung up. Tibbets sat in his kitchen for another 20 minutes. On the Friday, he sent for Fairweather. She stood at attention in front of his desk, and he did not tell her anything. He did not hint. He asked her one question, and it was the question that this entire 8 weeks had been walking toward. "Recruit Chief, if your numbers are right and the person is wrong, which one do you submit?" Fairweather did not answer immediately, which he respected. "Chief, I don't understand the question." "Yes, you do." She thought about it. 19 years old, in a chief's office, at the end of week 8, with 88 people's flag in a drawer somewhere. "The numbers, Chief," she said, because the numbers are the only thing I can actually see. If I start submitting what I think about people, I'm not a recruit chief. I'm just somebody with opinions and a billet." Tibbets looked at her for a long moment. "That is a very good answer," he said. "Write it down somewhere. You are going to want to remember exactly how you said it." "Aye, Chief. Carry on." She went out into the passageway and stood there for a second, and she could not have told anybody why her hands were cold. Tibbets stayed at his desk for a long time after she left. He had asked the question honestly, and she had answered it honestly, and the answer had been correct. And there is a particular kind of misery available to a chief petty officer who has just watched a 19-year-old give the right answer to a question he already knew was going to hurt her, because she was right. That was the whole trouble with it. In 11 years of running divisions, he had watched perhaps 200 recruits decide, at some point, that the standard did not apply to somebody they liked, and it had ended badly every single time, and the correction he gave them was always the same, and it was always the one Fairweather had just given herself without being told. Submit the numbers. Do not submit your opinion about people. It is the right rule. It is the rule that keeps a navy from being a collection of favorites. And it is a rule that had, in this one instance, on this one Friday, in this one building, produced a form on his desk that was going to take 4 years off a woman's life. He thought about the master chief on the telephone. Do not put your thumb on that scale. He thought about the folder in the drawer with the 9-page waiver in it and the date on the last page. Then he did the only thing he could think of that was neither putting his thumb on the scale nor doing nothing, which was to go home and sleep badly and come in on the Monday and get on with it. He was, at that point, still 11 days from picking up a telephone and doing the one thing he actually could do. Nothing had happened. She had answered a question correctly. The chief had told her it was a good answer. It was the last comfortable day she would have for 11 years. What the 19-year-old in the passageway did not know is what the 22nd of July was going to teach her. Subscribe so you do not miss it. 4 years earlier, on a night in October of 2022, Petty Officer First Class Inez Kowalchuk was 23 years old and standing in a dive locker at 2240 with a job that had come in 11 minutes before. She had been a Navy diver for 3 years by then. She was good at it in the way that does not photograph. Not the fastest, not the strongest, the one who checked the manifold twice and knew the tables cold and could tell you the answer before somebody had finished asking the question. The job was a flooded lock chamber at a civil works facility. A gate had failed. 2 maintenance workers had been in the chamber when it went, and they were not dead, which everybody knew because there was a radio in there, and one of them was talking on it. They were in an air pocket at the top of machinery space, and the pocket was getting smaller. Kowalchuk went in at 2311 with Petty Officer Second Class Dov Rasmussen on the surface running her. The water was black, not dark. Black in the way that industrial water is black, full of 40 years of silt off a concrete floor, so that a dive light did not illuminate anything. It just showed you the silt. She found the machinery space in 9 minutes by feel and by count, hand over hand, along a gantry rail she could not see. And she got into the chamber and put her head into the air pocket. And there were 2 men in it up to their chests, one of them holding the other one up. The pocket had perhaps 40 minutes. The correct procedure was to establish a guideline, exit, brief, and return with a second diver and a spare set. That was going to take 26 minutes minimum, and there was one set of tables in her head that said what would happen to her if she instead made 2 fast ascents in succession from that depth, and she knew every number in those tables, and she had taught them. The tables are not a suggestion. She knew that better than anybody on that job. She went up anyway. Twice. She took the conscious man first because he could hold on, and then she went back down for the second one, who could not, and the second ascent was the one that did it. There is no dramatic version of what happens next. There is no explosion, and there is nothing to look at. She came up beside the boat and pushed her mask onto her forehead and started to say something to Rasmussen, and then the pain arrived in her right shoulder like a nail going in, and 11 seconds later she could not lift her arm, and 40 seconds after that she could not properly get a breath. They had her in a recompression chamber in 91 minutes. 6 hours at pressure. Then another treatment the next day, and another. Both men lived. That is on the record, and it is not in dispute, and it is the only part of this she has ever said out loud to anyone. The shoulder took 11 months and 2 operations, and came back to about 80%. The lung did not come back. There is a specific, permanent, measurable reduction in what her body can do with oxygen when she is running, and it is not large, and it is not fixable, and it is entirely sufficient to put her at the bottom of a printed sheet on a bulkhead 4 years later. The medical board took 9 minutes. She was separated at 23 years old, with a rating she had spent 3 years earning, and a shoulder that ached in the cold, and a piece of paper that said, "Unfit." And then she spent 4 years getting that piece of paper reversed. That process is not a story anybody wants to hear. It is not brave, and it does not photograph. It is a woman working at a marine supply counter in a town she did not choose, doing rehabilitation 4 evenings a week for 4 years, obtaining 11 signatures from 11 offices, 2 of which said no the first time, and 1 of which said no twice. The waiver came through in February of 2026 with a condition attached because her break in service had run past the limit. Complete recruit training from the beginning, alongside 18-year-olds. She had done the arithmetic exactly once in her life, in black water, with 2 men in a shrinking air pocket, and she had refused the answer it gave her. It had cost her everything she had. She had spent 4 years buying it back, and she was 11 days from the end of it, and there was a form in a drawer in a chief's office with her name on it. On the 9th day, Fairweather worked out that the request had not moved. She did not find out by snooping. She found out because a setback request generates a routing receipt, and the receipt is posted. And on the Friday of week 9, the receipt still said the same thing it had said on the Thursday of week 8, with Recruit Division Commander. She stood in front of that board for a while. Then she requested to speak to the training officer. That is a real right, and it has a real procedure. A recruit may request massed up the chain, and Chief Tibbets had to grant it and forward it, and he did both, the same afternoon, without comment, and it took him about 90 seconds and cost him more than anybody in that building would know for another 2 weeks. The appointment was at 0900 on the Monday of week 10. She stood in an office in front of a lieutenant commander, and she was accurate. She gave the average 4 under. She gave the individual times for the last 3 graded runs. She gave the arithmetic on what the final would have to be. She stated that a setback request had been submitted on the Wednesday of week 8, and that as of Friday of week 9, it remained with the Recruit Division Commander with the endorsement block empty. She did not accuse Chief Tibbets of anything because she did not have anything to accuse him of. She stated a fact about a date. The training officer asked whether the member was aware. She said the member had been informed by Petty Officer Marchetti on the Thursday of week 8, in accordance with the rule. The training officer asked whether the member had responded. She said no, sir. She had nothing to say for the record. The training officer sent for Kowalchuk. That is the scene. 10 minutes later, 3 people in an office, a lieutenant commander behind a desk, a 19-year-old recruit chief standing at attention on the left, and a 27-year-old recruit standing at attention on the right, and a form on the desk between them with an empty endorsement block. Recruit Kowalchuk, you have heard the recruit chief's submission. Do you have anything to add? And Kowalchuk said the 4 words that Fairweather would carry for the rest of her career. No, sir. Her numbers are correct. And then she did something nobody in that division had seen her do in 10 weeks. She looked across at Imogen Fairweather, and she smiled at her. Not cruelly. Not with any edge at all. It was brief, and it was almost warm, and it was the smile of somebody who recognizes a person who is trying to do a difficult thing properly. Fairweather did not understand it. It made her cold all the way through, and she could not have told anybody why. The setback was approved at 0940 on the Monday of week 10, effective the following Monday. The following Monday was the 20th of July. Kowalchuk was told at 1100, procedurally, by Marchetti in the passageway. She said, "Aye, petty officer." She went back to the compartment, and she squared her rack. Then she squared Ordonez's, and then Fam's, to a standard nobody in that division had been taught, at 11:20 in the morning, for no credit, with 6 days left. Chief Tibbets found out at 11:15 and put his hand flat on his desk and left it there for a while. Then he picked up the telephone, and he did not call a master chief this time. He called the front office of Naval Service Training Command and asked to leave a message for the Admiral's aide, and the message was 4 sentences long, and it did not contain a name, and it did not ask for anything. It said that a policy revision currently in staffing had a live case at this command, that the case would be moot in 6 days, and that the chief thought somebody ought to know that before it was. Pass-in review was on the Friday, the 17th of July at 1000 in the drill hall. 88 recruits of Division 042 in ranks on the painted deck. 11 other divisions on either side. Families in the bleachers, 4 and 5 deep. Phones up. A grandmother in the second row who had flown in from somewhere and had not stopped crying since the doors opened. Division 042 did not carry a flag. The average had come out 3 points under on the final, which was better than 4, and was still under. And Fairweather had stood at the board and read it, and said nothing to anybody. Kowalchuk was in the 3rd rank, second from the left, because that is where the sheet put her. The ceremony ran the way it always runs. The band, the colors, the divisions marching on and forming up. The commanding officer's remarks, which are 4 minutes long and which nobody in the bleachers hears a word of. And then Rear Admiral Halvard Price, who is there because a 2-star or better is always there, and whose entire role in a pass-in review is to stand up, say something warm for 90 seconds, and sit down, walk to the microphone with a folder in his hand. He opened it, and then he said, "Division commanders, hold your divisions at attention." The drill hall changed temperature. There is no version of a pass-in review where the Admiral halts it. Not one. 800 recruits and 40 staff and 600 family members went absolutely still, and 88 people in Division 042 had exactly one thought, and it was that somebody was about to be destroyed in front of their mother. Fairweather, at the head of her division, felt her hands go numb. "I'm going to read something," Price said. "It is 2 paragraphs, and it is boring, and I'm going to read it anyway, because there is a person in this room who has waited 4 years for it, and I am not willing to let it go out by message traffic on a Tuesday." He read it. It was a revision to the Physical Readiness Qualification Standard, effective the 1st of July, establishing a phased qualification pathway for members returning to service with a documented service-connected physical limitation, permitting completion of recruit training with a graduated standard certified by medical authority. It was, as he had promised, boring. Then he turned the page. "The case history that drove this revision," he said, "is as follows. In October of 2022, a first-class petty officer, a Navy diver, entered a flooded chamber at a civil works facility to recover 2 trapped civilian maintenance workers. The air pocket they were in was diminishing. Standard procedure would have required approximately 26 minutes to execute safely. She made the assessment that they did not have 26 minutes. Nobody in that hall moved. She made 2 consecutive ascents outside the decompression tables. Both men lived. She sustained a decompression injury resulting in permanent reduction of pulmonary function and was medically separated at 23 years of age. He turned the page again. She spent 4 years obtaining a waiver to return to service. The waiver was granted with a condition requiring completion of recruit training. Because of the standard I have just read to you, which did not exist until 3 weeks ago, that individual was, until very recently, on track to fail out of recruit training on a running time. He closed the folder. He did not say her name. He did not look at Division 042. He did not look at anybody. He was looking at the back wall of the drill hall. "That is the whole message," he said. "Carry on." And then 88 people did the arithmetic at the same time. 27 years old. 9 years older than the median. The one nobody could explain. The one who floated for 11 minutes and 20 seconds and got out of the tank without the ladder. The one who was always on the last line of the sheet and never once made an excuse for it. The one who had stood in a compartment and been called Deadweight and had not gone red. 3rd rank, 2nd from the left. 87 heads did not turn because 87 people were at attention in a drill hall and had spent 10 weeks learning not to turn their heads. That was somehow worse. Nobody looked, and everybody knew, and the whole hall stood in it. Imogen Fairweather, at the head of the division, didn't move either. Her face went through it in order, and Chief Tibbets, standing at the side of the deck, where a recruit division commander stands, watched every stage of it and did not enjoy any of it. Confusion first, then the refusal, which lasted about a second and a half, then the arrival, when the sheet and the times and the 4 points and the form on the table under the lights at 1930 all rearranged themselves into a different shape. And then the last thing, which was not horror. It was understanding, which is worse, because horror passes. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was investigated. No inspector general opened a file, and no career ended. And that is worth stating plainly, because it is what everybody expects to happen next, and it is not what happened. What happened was administrative and took 4 days. The setback was rescinded on the Monday under the new standard, in 1 paragraph, signed by the training officer, effective immediately. Kowalchuk was certified against the graduated standard by medical authority on the Tuesday, which took under an hour because the documentation had been in her file since February. She graduated with Division 042 on the Thursday, the 23rd of July, 1 day past the date on the waiver, which was permissible because the completion date under the revised standard is the date of certification and not the date of the run. She graduated last in the division on the physical readiness average. That was printed on a sheet and posted, because the Navy posts things, and 88 people walked past it, and this time every single one of them read the last line and understood exactly what they were looking at. The flag was still lost. 3 points under is 3 points under, and a policy revision does not retroactively change a run time. And Fairweather stood in ranks on the Thursday while it was announced that Division 042 had not earned the physical readiness flag, and she stood there and took it, and that was the correct outcome, and everybody involved knew it. If somebody in your life has been carrying something you decided you had already understood, honor the version of them you have not met yet. Subscribe to Honor Tales. The restoration happened in an office with 4 people in it and took 11 minutes. There was no ceremony. because there is no ceremony for this. A rate and rank restoration on a return to service is a personnel action. Chief Tibbets was there because he asked to be. Marchetti was there because she was the one with the folder. A yeoman was there because somebody has to actually do it. The crow and the chevrons came out of a small cardboard box. "Petty Officer Kowalchuk," Tibbets said. "Welcome back." "Thank you, Chief." That was the whole thing. She met Fairweather in the passageway outside the compartment at 1400 on the Thursday, and it happened by accident, and they stood about 11 feet apart. Imogen Fairweather was a seaman recruit, 19 years old, 4 hours from graduating and shipping to her A school. Inez Kowalchuk was a petty officer first class. That gap had not existed at 0500 that morning, and it was going to exist for the rest of both of their careers, and neither of them mentioned it, and both of them knew it was there. Fairweather did not apologize. She had thought about it for 6 days, and she had worked out, somewhere around the 4th day, that an apology would be a thing she did to feel better, and that offering it would make a 27-year-old woman stand in a passageway and manage her feelings for her. So she asked a question instead. "Petty Officer, how does a person get to dive school?" Kowalchuk looked at her for a moment. "Ask me again in a year," she said, "and mean it." "Aye, Petty Officer." Fairweather. "Petty Officer, your numbers were right." Kowalchuk shifted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. "Don't learn the wrong thing from this. The Navy runs on people who submit what the sheet says. If you start deciding who deserves an exception, you'll be wrong more often than you're right, and you won't find out which until later." "Then what do I do?" "Submit the numbers," she said, "and go and find out about the person anyway. Not so you can change the paperwork, so that when somebody senior asks you what you think, you have actually got something to tell them." She picked up her bag. "That's the whole job," she said. "It took me until about a month ago to work it out, and I'm 27. She went out through the gate at 1740 with a bag on one shoulder and got on a bus. There was no wall with names on it. Nobody sent her a message from another country, and nothing was signed with a call sign, because she had never had one, and this was not that kind of story. She sat by the window and watched a training command get smaller, and somewhere behind her, in a building with high windows, a room-sized tank of water that 88 people had been in and out of for 10 weeks went slowly flat as the last of the motion went out of it. It took about 4 minutes. Then it was just a room with water in it, and the lights went off on a timer, and it was still there in the dark, being exactly what it was, waiting for the next division. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.